So today we're comparing the clean tones of the 2-Rock TS1 and the classic Reverb signature with a Stratocaster. Okay, so to me that's probably the best clean tone out of this amp. It's like the epitome of a really great Black Face Fender, slightly thick, but with that glassy, shimmery reverb sound. This is a bit thicker probably than an actual Fender amp would be, but this is it's a big and powerful amp. But I'm probably pushing things a little bit. The gain, as you'll see, is nearly on 3/4 of the way up, which for me gives this amp so much sort of dynamic ability. And I've also got the gain structure on the lowest setting. That is the Black Face setting, so it's scooped and has a lower output. So by doing that, I think I can get the best out of the amp. But if we want to be more, clean, let's start with that. And then we'll end up with the amp here. We'll do the same with the TS1. Okay, reverb. It needs reverb. That is brutal without reverb, and that's the main difference, to be honest with you. When you first plug in, there's no reverb, which will be great probably when we've got a lot of heavier gain stuff happening. Heavier gain. It's not heavy gain like a Soldano, but you know what I mean. But when you've just come from the 2-Rock, where the classic reverb, where the reverb is part of the tone, like those old Fender amps, you feel very naked. And the attack on the TS1 is a lot more direct, and there's a lot less squidge. It's less vintage feeling. It's a bit more hi-fi, and there's no bloom. It's altogether a bit more of a workout. Let's get some reverb on and see what happens. So I'm using the Topanga Reverb by Catalin Bread, which is just a good spring reverb pedal. So the TS1 is probably the most different of the 2-Rock amps compared to the others, in my opinion. It's much more of the Dumble Overdrive Special, and it's very sort of particular to that. It's not just, well, I say just, but it's not the Classic Reverb is basically like a Fender amp, just with some more controls and some, flavors of its own. But this really is like an overdrive special. Today we're in the clean channel, so we won't be using these two knobs here. This is a 100 watt amp, whereas this is a 40 watt amp. So I've got the master a bit lower. I've matched the EQs pretty closely. So even with the reverb pedal, the reverb doesn't feel the same. It doesn't have the same quality, obviously, as the physical spring reverb in the Classic Reverb signature. And the way that the reverb and the actual sort of tone of the amp play together aren't the same. You know, they don't have that same shimmery, glassy thing. And the way that a proper reverb interacts with the tone and the gain structure of an amp that it's part of. At that gain level, at sort of 10 o'clock, they're both a bit more sterile. In all settings, but I find at that setting that the TS1 is really, it's quite difficult with a Strat to get the tones I would want. It doesn't have any give to it. It's a little bit pushed and it's brutal. It's quite brutal. It's a loud amp. It's full. It doesn't really have like a scoop or anything like that, the way it's set up. So let's turn the gains up to 2 o'clock on both of them. The first little demo at the beginning was at 2 o'clock on the Classic Reverb. That's where I tend to keep it. So I want to hear how the TS1 is at 2 o'clock in comparison. What I found with the Classic Reverb signature there was, as I mentioned, I like the lowest gain structure setting, the one that's a bit scooped. In the other two settings, especially the top one, which is the 2-rock setting, that's most similar to the TS1. It's got a flatter EQ, it's a little bit less spongy, and overall it's just a bit more direct to play and to hear. And then in the middle setting, the Matt Schofield setting, it's got a bit more output, and it actually started just to get a bit sort of furry around the edges, which I like. And I think that's a really usable setting as well. In comparison so far, to me, there's no competition here yet. The Classic Reverb would be my choice for a clean amp at this point, but I'm keen to hear what the TS1 will be like. So look, overall, I definitely prefer the Classic Reverb for that clean sound. But then, if you're not coming from that sort of vintage Fender stuff, if that's not what you love already, then it's more of an open playing field. The TS1 definitely gets more dynamic and has more of a voice when the gain is turned up. So it softens a tiny bit. I still wouldn't say it has much sag or anything, but it definitely becomes more sort of, what's the right word? Lyrical? No, bit more sustain. Bit more saturation, and it's much easier to play. So I would set the gain higher rather than lower and use your guitar volume a lot. And it doesn't do that. It wasn't that edge of breakup sound. It was more syrupy than that, you know? But if I could only choose one of these amps for what I play, it would be the Classic Reverb. The clean is just possibly the best clean I've ever heard. It's very archetypal though, so if you're not interested in that, then probably not the amp for you. The reverb is stunning, better than any pedal you're going to get. So what I thought would be really cool just to leave you on is I've just turned off the reverb on the Classic Reverb signature so you can hear the amp without reverb, and everything I've said still sort of is true. Without the reverb, it's still more giving, more sag, more vintage sounding, more Fendery, obviously, and much more playable than the TS1 is. The TS1 has completely different use than the classic reverb. In the next video, I'm going to use humbuckers, and I think the TS1 will show itself in a different way there. But for a Strat, especially if you're going for anything Hendrixy, Stevie Ray Vaughan, standard blues, all those sorts of stuff, I would go classic reverb. Maybe if you were a jazz player or if you're a heavier player, the TS1's fuller tone, more sort of rounded and flatter mids might work best for you. But yeah, I hope you found this interesting. Let me know down in the comments what else you'd like to know about these amps in the future videos with other guitars. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this one and enjoy the No Reverb classic reverb signature clip, which I think is quite eye-opening because it still sounds like a classic reverb, still has beautiful harmonics, still easier to play, sounds fantastic. But yeah, cheers. Thank you.